You are down with.
Yo, Dave.
What up?
Drop the beat.
We like it old school. You know how we do this.
What you listening to?
The brothers from the 818.
91331.
Pacoima, California.
What's up, Dave?
What's up, Caleb?
The real, the raw, the relevant.
No script.
We invite you into our conversation. What's going on, people?
Let me just say this.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
You are down with.
The brothers from the 818.
What's going on, people? What's going on? This is David, two times back at you for another episode of The Brothers from the 818. As always, kicking it with my main man, Caleb. Caleb, what's going on with you?
David, 2 times, man. I need a nice nickname, man, that's going to be comparable to David 2 times. It's good, Dave. I'm glad to hear all of the positive feedback and to know that our listeners are actively engaged in the discussion for police reform. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get out of a panel of community members, and that have a wealth of experience from different educational backgrounds, different employment. But I love what we had last week, and I'm looking forward to more of that discussion this week. How about you? What's going on with you?
About the same, man. I love the positive feedback and the not so positive, right? And look, people, I say it all the time, you know, I love to hear from you and tell me all about it, the text messages, the calls. I've had some great conversations this week. Do it online, you know, just jump on YouTube, Facebook, say what you got to say, and, you know, let the conversation be stimulated that way. I love to hear it, and I'll take it however it comes. But, you know, you want to help us out. That really goes a long way. So, but yeah, people have some things to say, and I'm really interested in incorporating a lot of that feedback into not only episodes that are coming up, well, actually into the episodes that are coming up. So, looking forward to tonight. Tonight's actually a continuation of exactly where we started. We got minimum, you know, two more parts to this. In addition to tonight. So I advertise this as a 4-part series. Could be 6, could be 8. I mean, we only got through one question, man.
Right.
And
right.
So we just have to see. But I'm encouraged. Like I said before, if we need to be able to have these discussions in an element where everyone isn't there to agree with one another, right? Where we can actually have some engaging debate, even if it gets a little tense, just so the conversation gets started.
Yeah, you know, it's a tough discussion, right? And I don't know, you know, you talked about that feedback. People will send me, you know, I'm an iPhone dude, right? And so people will send me, you know, 300, 400 characters on my iPhone, right? And I'm like, you could have just dropped that right there, because we're checking the streaming networks, platforms, and we could see what you put there. Right. And maybe if you shared your opinion, then others will also voice their opinion, and we could be in a greater dialogue because of that. But it is tough. It is a tough discussion. I'm not sure how our viewers are going to love 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 weeks of police reform. You know, when we were in the heat of the debates, we were like, man, we need to talk about something else. We got this panel, and we're going to take advantage of the expertise of this panel, and it's going to be it's going to land where however it lands. But I'm excited that, you know, all of last year we spent, I don't know, we did 40 some episodes last year. We spent 25, 30 episodes talking about, you know, the police reform, civil unrest, and politics in this country. This is where we need to be, Dave.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to become comfortable with the George Floyd verdict and some of the changes and some of the trigger points that the media is talking about. That seems as if there's a lot of progress. I want to see the progress, and I want to continue to make progress on top of the progress. There's more work to do besides of the disgrace of the police force and what happened with George Floyd. And we need to keep talking about it, and we need to continue to come up with strategies that's going to address the bigger issues across our nation.
What you're about to see is the continuation from last week's conversation. If you need to brush up, just pull up the last 5 minutes of the last podcast, and it'll pick up right from there. And, just see. I think it got a little more edgy in part 2, and I'm really looking forward to continuing some of that edge and getting through some of that tension in parts 3 and 4. So you got anything else you want to get to the people?
No, man, let's get to it.
Stay tuned. We're going to flip this right over to continuation of police reform, part 2, only on the Brothers from the 818. We'll see you when we get back. Peace.
Peace.
So I'm glad we're able to have these conversations. And honestly, there's so much I can say. I'm listening, right? Because this isn't over for me. This is what's starting here, and it's going to go somewhere else. And I'm going to be able to re-engage, reapply, add these conversations up. So I'm really encouraged. I really appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt. Damani, if you were done, Zach, if you wanted to chime in, or Mike, if you want to say something else. Go ahead, Damani.
I just wanted to say one more thing to it. Again, moving from the West Coast, coming into the Midwest, and seeing the loopholes and the things that they do wrong here as well. I know, because a lot of them have been here their whole life. They don't see anything different. Again, we live in the Midwest where the Tamir Rice case happened. Again, Ohio is an open carry, concealed carry state. A 911 call, a kid playing in the park with a gun, and within 3 seconds, he was dead. That got to be the fastest investigative police officer in the world. He can just decipher what happened in 3 seconds. Like, he didn't get out, bark any commands, just check for ID. Do you have a permit for it? Then if he'd have heard him respond, he'd have saw it was a little kid playing in the swing with his sister. But we can't have that conversation. He's dead. And there are no white kids getting shot like that. And if they do, we know there's gonna be a whole different ball game being played. And so now, this frustration has built up. Now everybody's, coming out of the hinges and taking a back look at, from a homeowner, a business owner, myself, and a taxpayer. You say, okay, when I look in the lens of police reform, well, the first thing is these settlements that are going out of these courts, they go through these civil courts and they get these cash settlements. That money is not affecting the police union. That money is not affecting that police officer. That money is coming from the taxpayers' money. So if there's going to be some cash out, there needs to be some punitive damages on these police officers that actually did the act. I'm not painting the brush with all police. I'm also looking at them in the Midwest. When these protests come out, they're not out in MRAPs and fully vest up like they do in the West Coast. They out here, they stormed the Capitol in Wisconsin and Michigan. They were spitting in their face. White men armed, AR-15s, the whole nine. They just stood the road, didn't break the line, let them talk, let them have to say what they had to say. On the converse, people who are not armed, they out there in t-shirts and flip-flops, Black Lives Matter. They getting wore out for a whole summer. Then we find out with, again, January 6th, that the insurrection, the Capitol attacks in Wisconsin and Michigan were just test runs to see so they could try it on the 6th. Because it was the same groups. Same groups. And we know if that had been the Nation of Islam, the Hebrew Israelites, any black or in the Black Panthers or any group like that, they'd been pulling them out. RZA Islam was getting drug out of LA right now. He has to do it. He's coming to the Capitol. No, you and Farrakhan, y'all got to go. Everybody. Well, but with them, they're like, I guess they went to Osama bin Laden's school of hide and go seek. Nobody can find them. We don't know who they are. But Mike, I really appreciate it. I have two of my frat brothers I love dearly. Grew up, went to college, and became police officers. One of them, unfortunately, shot a person in the line of duty. And, he went through his standard procedure. He was off from work, pending investigation or what have you. He called me. I'm not a trained law enforcement. I don't know anything about it. He called me, and we had a different insight of why he was in that situation. And then after he went and had his psychiatric evaluation, he came back. Like a month later, he got approached by the SWAT team. He called me. He said, "Demani, they trying to move me up and trying to move me into the SWAT team." I said, "Yeah." He looked at me. He's like, "Why?" I said, "Dude, you shot somebody up close and personal, and you didn't go cuckoo. You definitely could shoot somebody from far away." I'm just police perspective wise. And of course, he went through the training. And again, he's been on police force 17 years now. Good officer. Love him to death. I was in his wedding. Matter of fact, I introduced him to his wife. He married one of my homegirls. That was a sorority. She was Delta Sigma Theta at the time.
Hey, Demani, man, thank you for that. What comes to mind is equity and disproportionality. I want to make sure that Zach has an opportunity to chime in and respond. Zach probably thought, "Hey, man, I get to go first, man." Zach went first, and he's been silent ever since because of the format of our roundtable. But Zach, man, please chime in and comment on anything you've heard from Demani, Mike, or Dave.
Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate all the views and perspectives on all of this. And when you sit back and I'm listening to Demani speak, just being from Oakland and from his family background and dynamic, and now living in the Midwest. And from what I know, and I may be a little off here, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated places that in the U.S. And I think knowing that, and then on the other half of the world, being here in Los Angeles, so I'm sure Mike sees a variety of different things. And for me, when you think about all of these different things, and I'm coming from the perspective of education, and let's be honest and frank, there's a difference when you think about education and policing, right? It doesn't, sometimes it goes together, but not necessarily. I don't know the term, but police officers, they act, and the education might sometimes at times be a second part of the job, so to speak, right? Nevertheless, when I think about those things, and to kind of give you guys some more transparency and also my thinking as well. So I'm a dean. I'm actually the dean of my school. I'm the dean of culture and climate. So when you talk about culture and climate, right, and it seems very, very elementary, so to speak. I'd sit there, I'd deal with kids. We work on the 3 C's: cooperation, collaboration, and communication, right? You think, hey, you know what? When you talk to the youngest of all kids and go through those steps and talk to them about those simple steps, right? How do they respond? What does it look like when individuals are collaborating, right? What happens? When we're not communicating with one another, what happens, right? Cooperation, all of those things. And you were looking at young kids. I'm looking at 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders that figure it out and understand that. But us as a whole have a hard time with that. But I think about all those things, and you talk about policing, and why is it that definitely, like Demani said, there is definitely a problem with accountability when it comes to minorities, especially African Americans, right now in society out there in the world, right? We're getting mowed down, point blank, for whatever reason. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know why, but I'm here to learn, and I'm here to understand that. But the most important thing I think of all of this is this stuff is almost similar to racism, right? Racism is not something that is, you're not born with racism, right? It's taught, it's developed, right? So these things, just like anything else, right, are being kind of manifested and put together and just, I don't know, coming about. But why? The question is why, right? Now, I don't have all the answers, and that's why we're on this, right? To talk about these things, to have thought-provoking conversations, to understand this stuff, right? But I know one thing, and I keep going back to elementary, and I keep going back to the education, I keep going back to kids, because we should be able to do this as adults, but it's deeper than that. And I think the number one thing is we have to acknowledge, right? A, what's going on. B, why is it going on, right? And then also, right, to move forward is very, very important that we take the opportunity to learn what it is we need to do. And if we sit here and, we take bits and pieces of it and, try to put something back together with missing parts, it's going to hold for a bit, but it's not going to work long term. So we need to figure out some long-term goals, long-term problem-solving solutions to whatever this is. But I'll tell you the number one thing, if I could say anything, just like education, kids, not only kids, that nobody will listen to you. You can't begin to teach a child if they don't have the basic necessities, such as eat, food, right? Food insecurities, right? And trust, right? Same thing with communities. You can't even begin to fix this problem if the community is not trusting, right? When you look at food insecurities, right, that has nothing to do with policing, but there are definitely some type of correlation between food insecurities and, not food insecurities, I'm sorry, but other type of insecurities within the community that are faced with when it comes to policing. So, not to go back and forth, not to keep going deep into this. I'm very interested to hear what more Mike has to say, Damani, because all of this stuff is so important and it's so key and critical to have the understanding, right? We understand that we're all humans, right? I think we could all agree on that, right? Everybody has families. Everybody wants to get home to their families. All of these things are important, right? But it's very important to have some understanding. It's very important to create an environment in which, there's trust amongst everybody that is living there. But how do we get to that point? And the first thing I think is the acknowledgement of what is going on. And then from there we can move forward. So.
Yeah, if I could chime in real quick, not to interrupt anybody who would like to speak, but to touch on a couple things, we can go off on a whole show on Breonna Taylor and some of these other ones, but you mentioned education for officers, and I think a lot of times we get caught up in this. We want change and we want it now, so we need to implement a policy to create change. Well, the reality is culture is going to trump policy all day long. If you don't change the culture, policy is going to mean it's not going to mean anything. So we talk about education. The reality is with street cops, and I don't work in an area where I drive around and smile and wave. I work in arguably the most violent 8 square miles, and if not the state, the nation, in Watts. So, criminal justice degrees are snickered at. It's the culture. What do you need an education for? We're hardcore street cops, and it's going to take a while to change that culture. And policy, you can require a college degree, but is that really going to change the culture? Is that going to really implement critical thinking, or is people just going to get a degree just to get that piece of paper so that they can come on and be an officer? I'm also going to mention something that David was referring to as far as when you surround yourself with like-minded people. I was lucky enough to have some self-scrutiny and some, to realize that I had surrounded myself in an echo chamber. When you're talking to like-minded people and you're just reinforcing your own ideas. So the main reason I decided to go to USC to get an education in an urban environment, I knew exactly what I was getting into. I was going to hear the other side. And I think there's a distinctive difference between hearing the other side and actually listening to the other side. So in class, I do what David is trying to do right now, in that, I'm seeking to understand, and I'm not going to seek to be understood. I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen to what everybody is saying, because this is a side I've never really listened to before. I know my side. It's been developing my entire life, but I don't know the other side. And so I think we should all challenge each other. I've challenged my classmates because they're in the same echo chamber. I'm the only conservative in that class. And it doesn't help that I'm a white cop as well in this current climate. But I also need to hear that other side. And I'm going to transition real quick because I want to know your thoughts on this. And how do we decide, or not how do we decide, but we mentioned the knife shooting, and Damani mentioned that it was a justified shooting. With the outrage that happened over that, does it take away from all the unjustified shootings? When we make a big deal about a shooting like that, why don't we make a big deal about the shooting where the guy's running through the baseball field and the officer, I think it was in Kansas City, shoots him in the back and then throws his taser down? How come that one doesn't make it to mainstream media, but we react over someone stabbing someone on video? How do we pick and choose which one of these? And I fear that to react the way some people did over this recent one with the knife, it takes away from the Floyd. It takes away from some of the other one. And I don't know. I feel like we get to the point where every single time the police pulls the trigger, it's wrong. And we may be diluting what's happening here right now. I wonder if we've got to the point where every single time police use lethal force, we're condemning them, and we're taking away from those instances where clearly deadly force should not have been used. And I almost feel like, are we focusing on every single one, or we may be losing traction as far as what's really happening, and we may be losing those who feel, well, now they're getting mad at every single one, so now what's the point? And I don't know if we've got to that point and we're going backwards, I guess, is what I'm saying, by getting upset at every single time. And in my mind, what looks to be an obvious good shooting where someone is literally stabbing somebody else with a knife, now all of a sudden it's not a good shooting. And I think it takes away from those shootings that are clearly wrong, by getting mad at every single one.
So, Mike, I think you bring up an excellent point, and I want to steer the question a little bit and throw it back, for you three gentlemen. And again, I just can't continue to thank you enough. But one, there are per capita more white people than black, so there should be more arrests. There should be more. But if you look at the per capita stats, the percentages are way off. And that's what we look at. Now, as far as justified versus unjustified, I'll be the first one to say, I don't know. I'm not a police officer. I don't have that burden of responsibility, but I know that there are police officers who don't carry it properly. So for the ones that do, it serves a disservice to them when we compare them with the ones that don't. And for the ones that don't, we're giving them a pass because we're only looking at the ones that do. And I'm on the fence with the McKay Bryant shooting. But I look at it and I have to ask the question, did it require 4 shots to the torso? Could 1 shot to the leg have done it? Was it justified? And again, I'm not in a position to know what's right or wrong because I don't know how I would have handled the situation because I wasn't in that situation. My day-to-day emergency doesn't look like that, right? But as Damani pointed out, this was a call. It was talking about what was going on. Police showed up on alert. There are millions of reasons why I could understand why someone would say that's a justified shooting. Listening to someone else, I could understand the other. What I do know is a little girl's life is lost in the middle of a situation where shootings, miss-shootings, justified or unjustified, are seeming to pile on back to back. And it's hard to grab that small paintbrush when every time I pick it up, the canvas has changed because something else has happened. And I pick up another one and the canvas has changed. And so I know that's going through a lot of people's minds. Maybe not so passionately, maybe not so eloquently, or maybe they're just focused on the point that I'm tired.
Real quick, a couple things. First, the shooting in the leg, we hear this quite often. And so police officers we're trained to shoot for the center body mass because this is the largest target. And we shoot every other month, and our closest distance is from 7 yards. And we have officers miss. The officers are stationary, the target is stationary, and we still have officers miss. That's the reality. Now you throw in your movement, suspect's movement, adrenaline, everything else that goes on with these things. The shooting in the leg, if it happens, I guarantee is accidental. It's what's called mashing. So we had an instance in downtown LA, and the 4 shots was also mentioned. We had an incident in downtown LA where an individual had stabbed his girlfriend to death and was wandering the streets downtown LA, approached a police car. The officer drove around to give himself some distance. Ultimately, the suspect with the knife in his hand charged the officers. The officer fired 17 times, struck the suspect 15 times. 15 of those shots were fatal. And that suspect traveled 31 feet from the time he got shot the first time. So it is not Hollywood where you shoot someone and they fly across the room. Sometimes it takes 17 shots to stop someone. 31 feet that person traveled from the first time he got hit with 1 bullet. So in this instance, it took 4 shots to stop. We don't shoot to kill, we shoot to stop. Once the actions are stopped, we're done. And we're held accountable for every single bullet. So that's just one thing about the shooting. As far as, and I've heard this in class where my children are afraid to be stopped by the police. This perception that's been created where we take an instance and we make it appear as if it's a commonality when I got a question I'm gonna throw out to all you guys, and this is part of the questions I have, and I hope we're open enough to discuss this, but half the murders in this country every single year are Black men dying. 14,000 murders annually, 7,000 of them are Black males, and the suspects are Black males. Should Black males be afraid of the police or their fellow Black man?
Damani, I'll let you, it was interesting. I heard something Mike said, right? But Damani, whatever thought that you just had from the question that Mike posed, you go ahead and answer that. But Mike, you said something interesting. You just talked about that individual, right? That was in downtown LA or whatnot, that the police shot 15 times, or excuse me, 17 times, it took 15 shots, so forth. And then you finished off that statement by saying, and they were held accountable for every single shot, right? And I take that statement that you said right there, right? And it's interesting to me because that's the problem that I think a lot of people are having. They're not held accountable for every single shot. There's not enough transparency, right? Those are the things we're facing, right, with police at times, right? And once again, I continue to say this, and it's very important to me to make this very clear. Not all officers are bad. It's not all bad, but there are some people in policing that are not being held accountable, and it's showing. It is being shown. And what, to David's point earlier, with his 2 sons or whatnot, you are witnessing. It's called battle fatigue from a standpoint of a cultural group and experience here. African Americans, I'm going to speak for myself, It's battle fatigue. This is a constant fight, a constant, I guess, bringing awareness and education to not only your own kids, but kids that look like yourself, kids of our communities, people of all races and everything else. But essentially, in my community and myself, you're looking at minorities and African Americans, and that's what we're facing. So when you ask the question, or when you pose the question, and you say, you know, are some of these, I guess, incidents that are happening, are they essentially kind of diminishing the other ones? In my eyes, absolutely not, because not everybody's held accountable. And that is the problem that we're facing. And that is the I guess the source of this battle fatigue that we're having. And there has been no, I guess, there's no resolution to it yet. And that's what we're struggling as a group, as a community, as, you know, just people in general. And that's why I said there needs to be some type of transparency, some type of 360 degree of whatever it may be to bring some, I guess, some stability out there, and to find something that will help this situation, so to speak.
Can you hear me? I want to say, addressing Mike's question, again, in my perspective, growing up in the streets of Oakland, California, one, we ain't never scared. I acknowledge as a male, black male in Generation X, I am the warrior representative of the warrior class of my people. So I don't fear my own people anywhere I go. And I've been through the roughest neighborhoods all through California, and everybody know who I am. And outside in LA, the only place that I felt like my heart stopped, it was so dangerous, was Southeast DC and Fifth Ward, Texas, outside of Houston. And I've been all the boroughs of New York, all the tough guys. It's like, okay, amongst us, you learn a language that's unwritten. You know when your life is in danger from another black person. You know if you are bringing something to some hungry people. There's people, you in a low income area and they just hanging out, and then you jump out with all this gold and you tell your kid to go, you give him your platinum card and tell him to go in the 7-Eleven and get him something to eat. You become food. And if you're not streetwise and know that you are in that situation, yeah, other black men become a danger to you. For me, again, I'm in an open carry in a concealed state, which is part of, I've been here 12 years. I guess living here long enough, because of California's laws, I won't come back. Once you live in a Second Amendment state, you have a different perspective. And the perspective is all the ills in society, they exist everywhere across the board. But does that state allow its citizens to defend itself? Because if something might pop off, I can't call the police, and they're definitely not going to be there in the moment. I'll be appreciating, like, oh, officer, Mike, you did your thing, man. I'm glad you showed up. But that might not be the case. And if I defend myself, and by California standpoint, all of a sudden I become the criminal. Because they're going to ask me, well, how did you get this gun so quick? Because you're not supposed to have a gun in your car by California law. It's supposed to be in the trunk and the bullets separated and all this other stuff. Like, oh, do that. You know what I mean? You start going into this other scenario. But in an open carry and concealed state, you are always mindful as a black person that I'm more likely to use this lethal force against someone who looks like me. That is a reality. And it comes with age, because right now, if I see a guy that's my age, I can talk to him. But if I see one of these young cats out there, oh, we speaking a whole different language. And they on drugs that I ain't never heard of. And like, okay, dude, don't look, he think he bulletproof. I'm already got to be prepared. I hadn't even got to some racist white person. I ain't got to know police, and even police. I'm not afraid of police. I've been in many situations with the police that I should have been in jail. No disrespect, Mike, but I'm not afraid of them. I'm acting according as a legal citizen. My car is registered. My tag's up to date. I got insurance, and I got all my information to say I can carry a firearm if you find one in my car. And I will disclose that information to you. Now you start getting on to this power trip. Oh, you get down on the ground. I'm laying you down in the mud right now. You're gonna ride the lightning. And you start coming with all of that. Dude, you might find another Damani. I don't know. I had this scenario with my wives with my wife all the time. My son's mother is from Watts. She grew up on Imperial and Clovis. My wife today is from the Pueblos. You know, I like tough women, you know. if it get hood, and my wife is a lot like my mama. If she pop off her earrings, I might not be able to get her off you. So we have a different way of how that goes. And we just kind of, you know, I'm not afraid of police. Hey, you just do your job. I know from growing up in California, hey man, I'm keeping my hands visible. And now with social media, I'm gonna have to click my phone and record just to make sure. Like, you know, I don't think you're gonna do nothing, but I'm gonna make sure. And then also, I live in an area where everybody kind of know each other, and you know, other black people are like, hey, you know that guy in the neighborhood? We're like, no, I never seen him before. You know me, I don't take it no mind. But in Wisconsin, they the snitchy state. That car been parked there for 2 days. So look at how did you know that? I had that type of time to be paying attention to people like that. But I know that exists. I like communicating, again, has saved my life through many a scenario. And again, I've traveled all over the US and I've been in some of the worst areas just hanging out. I got friends that live in these places like, D, be careful going over here. Like, no, I'm going right there. I'm not scared of them. And I can talk the language. I know if my life is being threatened. I know if I'm out of pocket, and especially going up in California, you know, it's a Crip area. They gonna roll up in there all flamed up. My fraternity, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. My favorite color is red and white. I'm happen to do that, and I know they rolling 60s in Louisiana. I'm not gonna do that. You know, I go to Chicago. Chicago, we Chirac. I just sit back and like, I said, dude. They compared Oakland to Beirut 2 decades ago. Now, I never been to Beirut, but it must have been a bad place. They compared Oakland to it. And then once they come in, like, yeah. And then I said, dude, why y'all killing each other? They don't have an answer. I said, well, I don't like this. I said, man, if I went and got him and put him in the room with you right now, he'd probably beat your tail. They get huffing and puffing. And they say, yeah, that's dumb. I said, when I grew up, you fight your battles, don't never run. You win some, you lose some. Even back in the days in my neighborhood, the police, it was a code of against gangsters and police. If you was out there talking crazy to a police officer, they called it a square deal. They would take off they belt and they say, you all big and bad, we're gonna go in this alley right here and handle that. If you beat me, okay, you got one. If I beat you, you're going to jail for assaulting police. And they hammered that out. You jumped out on a police officer with a knife and I'll do this, I'll do that. The police officer hit you with Billy Club, over. They didn't kill you. Now you jumped out with an Uzi, Mac 10 or something, whatever was popular on Miami Vice at the time in the 80s. Yeah, you was going to get Swiss cheesed up. I remember police officers in my neighborhood when cats did something, shot so-and-so little brother. The police, especially if they older brother was in a gang, they would roll him over there like, hey, man, we about to take him in. You want a hot box minute with him? They put you in the back of the police car, turn the other way. They're like, okay, that's enough. We got to take him in. They brought him to the station. How he get all lumped up? Oh, he fell. And that was a code amongst the gangsters and the police. And the mamas came back, you know, thank you, officer, so-and-so. Looking out for my son. I wish he didn't die, but, you know, he was cool. And then we didn't have all this foolishness. We don't hate all police. But when you just do something just went too far, in Oakland, we had the riders. They start forming gangs in the police. We was like, dude, I got a friend. He got keloids around his wrists because the riders handcuffed him to the tailpipe of a motorcycle until it warmed up. And when the handcuffs start heating up, it started burning on his wrist. So he'll tell all the information. That happened in 86, 85. That's unheard of now. And I was like, dude, this is crazy. And living out here, I said, man, we grew up as Black people, and those of us who grew up in urban environments, we grew up in war zones. Living out here, they think bullets go one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they got all these AR-15s and all of this stuff. I'm like, dude, you ain't. If soon as somebody shoot back at you, you're gonna drop all of them.
It's funny listening to you speak the money, and I can't cop out to anything. I'm still active, but the dropping of the belts, and that is not an old wives' tale. That is an old school mindset, and that happens. And I may or may not have seen that happen. Body cameras have, I mean, we could go off on this, but body cameras have eliminated a lot of our discretion. So the day of catching a kid with a pistol and I gotta walk down this street every day to school. The day of letting that kid go is gone. Now I'm letting a felony suspect go. Body cameras have alleviated all of our discretion. It would be very common for a robbery call to come out at a high school. One kid snatches another kid's chain or cell phone. We'd pull up, throw a kid in the back seat. Let's go look for him. That's the kid right there. Jump out, grab him up, give him a little talking to, get the stuff back. That's it. We just let a robbery suspect go. But what damage we would do to that kid by arresting him for a felony when a talking to is far more important. But we've lost that ability with the body cameras. Now we're misconduct by letting something like go. So body cameras are not necessarily the answer to everything.
Hey D, man, I appreciate the historical perspective, how police and the community used to be in collaboration. And by the way, come back to Cali, man. Come back and visit us, man. Don't you can't open carry, but come back and visit us. And I'm glad that you know the Cali laws well too. You know that to keep the weapon and the weapon and the magazine separate.
The Black Panthers, Caleb. I know the laws well.
I want to respond to Mike's question. I want to respond to Mike's question regarding the deaths in America. The Black deaths in America. Should Blacks be afraid of other Blacks? I think that Blacks, or should they be afraid of the law enforcement? I think they should be afraid of both. Right? But they shouldn't have to be afraid of law enforcement. Because law enforcement, at least in the state that I grew up in the 818 in California, Los Angeles County, LAPD is supposed to be protecting and serving. Protecting and serving. And in nowhere in that, my understanding of protecting and serving, should a person have to fear the police. I think it goes back to equality and disproportionality. I think it goes back to education. I loved your perspective on education. And there needs to be a more conversation about escalation of force with law enforcement, because it's not equitable the way that, in my opinion, in the way that law enforcement responds to a Black man and a white man. It's not equitable. Dave, you have other questions? You have a response?
I have a statement, small response. I'm not going to use the word afraid or fear. I'm going to use the term leery. We're all leery of strangers. We're leery of outsiders. Like you said, Devani, cars parked in your neighborhood too long, people get snitchy. Why are you here? What's going on? I'm not afraid of any Black man, and especially one my age, because I can talk to them. Youngsters, they can get crazy. They can. And you just don't know the language they're coming at and so forth and so on. But there is a trust. There is a acceptance of, I know the pot I'm in. And it's hot. Sometimes it's dangerous, but I can navigate this one. It's the outsider that comes in. But when you're from outside, you're a stranger, and strangers aren't trusted, right? Regardless of the aggression, regardless of the violence and so forth that goes on. And then the bigger question is, if we're going to start talking about, which we may or we may not, we probably won't tonight, but I mean, you know, we could be on here for weeks. The bigger question is, if we're going to start to look at, should black people be afraid of black people, or how dangerous is the inner city? Well, how did the inner city become the inner city? Let's start talking about that. Let's start talking about how there's a show on, is it Hulu, Netflix right now, called Them, that's bringing highlight to 1950s Compton before the white flight out, and what it looked like to be a black man trying to get into that suburban area versus Compton today, right? And so you got far enough back, you start to look at the roots for all of this. And one of the things that we brought up, or I think, Zach, you brought up, and it's the only time it's been mentioned, is racism. What does that look like? I think there's a big component there that becomes the elephant in the room, and we look irresponsible if we don't address it. Now, again, I'm talking to you guys, I'm talking to those of you watching it. It will be addressed. Whether it's you try to tune in next time to catch it, we will address it, because it has to be discussed as an embodiment of a policy. Right? I'm not saying anybody in this room is racist. I'm not saying all police are racist. I'm not saying all black people are racist. I'm not pointing the finger at an individual or an entity. What I'm saying is racism is a body of policy embraced by those in power. The body cameras discussion, I definitely want to have that conversation. That goes back into the transparency. That goes back to accountability. People, listen, this is Brothers from the 818. And Caleb and I, you know, if you're a fan of this show, if you know anything about the show, we always say we're going to keep it raw, we're going to keep it real, we're going to keep it relevant. Tonight is just a drop in the bucket of a beginning of a conversation that's going to get a lot deeper, a lot more aggressive, preferably a lot more engaged at this same intensity, because the one thing I think we can all agree on, I'm feeling good about this conversation. I'm not feeling like, oh man, that we're not saying something, or we are saying something, or, you know, I'm upset or anything that was said. I think there's been some challenging topics. I think we're engaging on different levels and different perspectives, and we're all speaking our truth. But accountability has come up in a major way. Transparency has come up in a major way. And wherever this conversation goes, that's going to keep coming up. Accountability, transparency, and so forth. There's the attempt of what's happening. There's the actuality of what's going on. And then there's how do we move on and still create a situation or an America, an environment that we can all engage in and live and coexist. The old school mentality worked until it didn't. The body cam philosophy makes sense to me. At the same time, it doesn't. Right? There's so much going on in this conversation that, you know, we just have to understand each other's perspective. We have to maintain that passion, and to hear more of it, you got to keep coming back. Caleb?
No, man, you wrapped it up. I want to just thank our guests and just express my appreciation for everyone, for their perspectives, for their insight, for their views and their education. I feel like I've been educated in some areas. I definitely am walking away from this conversation, feeling better about the policing in my community, and I feel like more discussions like this need to be had in order for real change to take place. So I'm gonna toss it back to you, Dave.
We'll see you next time on the Brothers from the 818. Peace.
Peace.
You are down with
The Brothers from the